Hey, BC's here, and welcome to my season 8 of the VDL season wrap up, where I discuss kind of what happened in my season, my thoughts, and what mons did well, what mons didn't do well, and some of my thoughts or cool tech I might have ended up not using that I wanted to try out. So in addition to that, this is probably my last video of my own personal drafts until probably January. So it'll be a little while. So hopefully y'all, don't unsubscribe or whatever. But with that, let's just go into what happened this season. So here is my season. So on the left, you can see this is my schedule and all the matches and how they went. And on the right was my ranking within my division. So first and foremost, this was the best division or best season I ever had in the VDL. I went 5-3 plus 6. My previous best record was 4-4 plus 0. So this is significantly better than my last one. In addition to that, I this is kind of the first time I actually earned my playoff spot. So I made it to playoffs one time before this. However, I was actually the 13th team and only the top 12 make it. However, one of the teams that made playoffs decided to drop before the start of playoffs. And so that's how I made playoffs. So this is the first time I made playoffs for real. And in addition to that, I was incredibly close to getting first seed and getting a bye to the first round of playoffs. I had two big moments that I think ended up leading to two of my losses in the regular season. In week 8, I had a flinch on a rock slide that if I didn't get flinched, I get trick room up and I probably win. And then week 2, I ended up missing a high horsepower on a Salazzle, which probably ended up causing me to lose the match. So definitely two really close situations where I easily could have gone 6-2, +8 or +9. But I'm very happy with the season overall. And in addition to that, I got my first playoff win and made it to the furthest I've ever made it in playoffs, because last time I made playoffs, I lost in the first round in a pretty close match, but definitely a loss. In addition to this, I'm just really happy with how the season went, because I had a really rough start going 0-2 with, I think, my worst start on the VDL, and probably one of my worst starts in the general, because I normally get a win in the first couple of weeks. And I was able to then proceed getting 5 consecutive wins in a row after my 0-2 start, which was really nice. But that's kind of the general wrap up on the ideas of what happened to the team. Now let's talk about my specific team. So here's my team, and on the left you can kind of see them are separated by tiers, and on the right you can see on usage how many times I brought them and that type of things. So unlike some of my previous drafts, I only got one tier 1. That's for a couple reasons, but the big one is Glacier is the only tier 1 Icemon, so I didn't really have any options. And so I got a lot of tier 4s, and I have a lot of tier 2s. And if you kind of look at the number of games played, you can kind of see that for the most part, I really liked my tier 2s and tier 1s, and I liked my tier 3s, and then my tier 4s were less used but somewhat used, and then my tier 5 was basically never used. So I'm just going to kind of go over the mons that I thought I was most happy with and least happy with, starting with Frostlass. I did not like my Frostlass pick. It was very unimpressive. So the idea behind Frostlass is it's a very good speed tier at 110. It has an immunity to fighting. My issue with it is it just doesn't do enough when it's on the field. I brought it one week in which it was supposed to be, bulky support with Thunder Wave, and it died the first turn before it moved, which was really awkward. And similarly, like every time I've tried bringing it, I'm like, oh, I can do this, and then I did some damage calcs, and then it just died. Or I considered, other aspects where I was being more offensive leaning, and its damage output was bad. And the big issue with it is just kind of that its move pool is not as exciting as I'd want it to be, and it doesn't pressure my opponent's team that well. And in addition to that, normally my speed control with Icy Wind support is better served with something like Ninetales, because I can also set up the Hell, which breaks stashes and gives me 100% accurate blizzards. And the other issue is, like, typically it kind of feels almost an identical role to Ninetales, and thus it really didn't have as much of a purpose, because Ninetales, though, is they're basically the same speed, they basically have the same move pool for the most part. The big thing is, and they both have the fighting, they don't take super effective damage to fighting. The big difference is just Ninetales setups the hell and, is a little bit better supporting in that because of that. Next up, the mon that was not super exciting was Aurorus. I used both of these equally as much. Aurorus, I actually enjoyed the use I had it. I brought it against, I believe it was the Araquanids, in which, ended up doing some pretty good work. And on top of that, it was a tier 5. And it's not like I actually picked it super well high up in the tier 5 because I thought it was going to be amazing. It's just that none of the tier 5s super excited me. I considered picking maybe, instead of Aurorus, maybe something like Walrein as a tier 5. However, I ended up with 2 Water Ice Mons, so I think it's probably a good idea that I didn't get the Walrein. But the big thing with Aurorus is just it's not particularly fast, but it's not slow enough to be great in Trick Room. It has 2 4 times weaknesses in fighting and steel, in which fighting steel is perfect combination onto my team. By perfect combination, I mean it hits every single Pokemon on my team for super effective. And so I'm expecting to see at least one of those by in the vast majority of Pokemon each given week. And so there's, you really need a very specific situation in which Aurorus is good with my team composition, and I didn't do it much. I really considered it a lot more than I considered Frostlass. I know Frostlass, I almost brought it my first round of playoffs, but I ended up replacing it with Ninetales, as I kind of mentioned earlier, how Ninetales kind of filled his role a lot. And Aurorus, I definitely considered one of the sets I really wanted to use was Refrigerate Hyper Beam Aurorus, or Special Power Meteor Beam Aurorus. And I've definitely did a lot of damage calcs with that, considered it a lot of times. But the big issue is just normally what happened was it was a situation where it's like, okay, if they bring Scarfmon, it just becomes useless. Or if, they bring this thing, it becomes useless. And, that's kind of what ended up happening with the Aurorus. So those are, I think, the only 2 mons that I would say were probably disappointing. I think every other mon on my team, I think I was actually happy with. And I don't think I would actually have, I was disappointed with them in any aspect. However, the mons that I would consider next were the Piloswine Rotom. It's really hard to say which one is the worst out of these two because they're so identical. If you look at them, they have the exact same number of games brought, they have the exact same kills to death ratio, and I don't know. So I think Paloswine was a little bit better. However, I had higher expectations for Paloswine, so it kind of balances out in that aspect. So Paloswine was good in the fact that it was good Trick Room Mon. It had thick fat, so I could have it as a fire neutral Mon. Ground coverage was good into the steel Mons that were powerful into my team. Rotom is powerful in the fact that it's pretty bulky, has Will-O-Wisp, Electro Web, Thunderbolt. My team, does struggle a little bit against bulky water mons, especially if, if they are especially bulky because my main damage is freeze dry. And so I know Tapu Fini, that's what in the playoffs I brought Rotom to deal with, and that was very powerful. Paloswine, I know I played it a couple times, but like I said, the big thing is just they weren't as useful as I want. Rotom frequently, I felt the need to bring it incredibly bulky because it wasn't taking the hits I wanted to. And so, because it was so bulky, it ended up not outspeeding certain mons or it didn't do enough damage, and therefore it just wasn't as impressive. Paloswine, similarly, it kind of ended up being a mon that I really want to be in Trick Room. I didn't lean Trick Room a lot, and so it ended up not being as powerful in that aspect. However, I was very happy with both of these. They were both vital members of my team. I know Rotom had a major work in my week 6 match against the Tentacle Pirates, in which it had, I did my Eerie Impulse Will-O-Wisp set, and that ended up being massively impactful. I know Paloswine had a couple big moments, but the big one was in week 4 against Goomer, in which I was able to get a win with that in Trick Room in game 2, and then in game 1 without even being in Trick Room, just with the ice shards and the high horsepowers. But like I said, so they definitely weren't the best mons, but I was very happy with them overall. My next mon is Cloister. So Cloister, I think I was very happy with. Not only was it, so unlike the other two, this one was brought the same number of times as the other two. However, this one actually was traded. So I actually didn't have this mon until week 4. So it actually was 3 fewer weeks than the other two. Before that, I had Sandslash, and I will say without a doubt in my mind that I am happy that I replaced Sandslash with Cloister. Sandslash was the idea was to get another Slush Rush user that's a little bit faster than Arctivish. However, its damage output was really unimpressive, and Cloister was very exciting. So I mainly leaned on it with the Skill Link Assault Vest set because Cloister's special defense is pretty bad, but with an Assault Vest, it takes very good, it's very bulky and very hard to kill. I was getting it to be able to survive, I think, 2 expanding forces from NDD female with the Assault Vest and being able to, with Pen Missile, do like 80% into the NDD. With Rock Blast, I was doing like 90, 80, 90% into an Inte. With, I know Pen Missile, I was doing like 60, 70% into Slow Bro the week I brought it. And then the final week, it didn't perform as well as I wanted in my week, my quarterfinals of the playoffs. But I ended up doing a shell armor, super physically bulky Whirlpool Iron Defense set, and I definitely think it could have been very good. It was very close to being very good, but wasn't it didn't quite get there. But overall, I think Cloister does a couple things. It is actually it is a mon that can actually switch into a steel move. Even though I have a couple of mons that aren't weak to steel, they aren't bulky enough to be able to switch into those moves. Cloister actually can switch into still moves, the physical still moves, and be in pretty good shape. I think that's a big thing that it does. In addition to that, um, the skill link Rock Blast is a really big deal at dealing with fire mons because both Cloister is not weak to fire, and that I think is very powerful, especially given the fact that I also had the water coverage to deal with it. So Cloister just ended up being a really good answer to a lot of the steel, the fire mons, um, and being able to take those moves as well. I definitely wanted to and was excited to try out some Shell Smash Cloister sets. However, the issue with the Shell Smash Cloister just ended up being that most of the times in which it seemed like it was going to be good, I was paired against a mon that had priority moves, and that could really punish it, or I was paired against an opponent that had Tailwind, and if they get Tailwind up, it ended up being useless. But I really wanted to try it. There's a couple times I almost did it, but combination of just priority moves or Tailwind or things like that ended up making me not want to use, or end up not using it. So next up on my next most impressive mon, we have Glastrier. So Glastrier was a mon I actually didn't really care that much about having, and I wasn't really expecting to use it much this season. The only reason I drafted it was because I needed a tier 1 and it was required. However, Glastrier was actually very good this season. I think it gave me a very strong Trick Room mode with a 30 base speed mon, which is very good speed tier. Even I used it multiple times outside of Trick Room, exclusive without even trying to be in Trick Room. I know one of my more interesting sets was week 7, in which I brought the Iron Defense Body Press Glastrier, in which I had no physical moves, and it was like no attacking moves with my attack stat. It was I only had Snarl and Body Press, and it was just max bulk Glastrier, and it did a lot of work. And though I had Trick Room, the main game plan wasn't necessarily to get a Trick Room; it was just to set up the Glastrier and be able to take the moves and kill him. In addition, I know my week 3 match, my first one of the season, Glastrier was a huge piece because it made my opponent less likely to want to set up Trick Room, even though they had a really good Trick Room mode with Bronze on. But like I said, just Glastrier just being a bulky, good offensive mod that I can theoretically run outside of Trick Room, especially if I have something like Fake Out support, was really impactful. You know, obviously, I think one of the reasons it's not as high on the list of as my mons that were great is it is a tier one, so it should be one of my better mons, and I definitely don't think it is as good as any of my tier twos. However, I do think that it was a vital piece of my team, and the mon was definitely very helpful to me. Yeah, overall. So with that, we can go to the next mon, my next most impressive mon, which was Weavile. So Weavile, I've actually run before in my Mono Dark team, and just as last time, I think Weavile performed exactly as well as I expected, and no better, no worse. Obviously, having used it before, it's not too surprising. The big thing with Weavile is just Weavile is very fast. It's actually the fastest natural fake out mon. Obviously, I think week two I had a big issue because there was unburdened Lipard that out faked out it, and so it ended up being awkward. But it's the fastest natural fake out. It has pretty good attack stat. It gets triple axle, and throat chop. I know my playoff match. Throat chop was actually a big deal at preventing snarls, but and it also has feint to deal with the possible protects. But Weavile just kind of is exactly what you expected, and so I brought it quite a bit, but it wasn't necessarily impressive. It just did its job, which was fast fake out, fast damage with triple axle, or fast like speed control with icy wind. But it almost always needed to bring focus sash because it pretty much got killed by any physical super effective move, in which when I'm playing against anyone this entire season, I'm expecting every single mon on their team to have a super effective move into Weavile. And so basically, it almost always had a run focus ash, and it basically did its one job, which it did its job well, but it wasn't super impressive. It just so fake out support, did some damage, died, and normally you're happy with it. I think I had a fun set. I can't remember. I think it was week one. The fling King's Rock, double flinch, which was really cool. I definitely considered and wanted to run it a couple more times, but I frequently got into situations where I just felt like I couldn't really do it. Next up, we have Arctivish. So Arctivish I did not bring as many times as Weavile. However, I definitely think it had a bigger impact when it came. I think pretty much every time I brought Arctivish, it was the single reason that I won the game, or it was you know it was the best mon in the season, the week I brought it. I you know Arctivish, when I drafted the team, I thought was going to be a major component of the team. It ended up bringing it a little bit less than I was expecting, but you know, basically, Fish's Ren in the Hell is amazing when in the right situation, and I think Arctivish, I think I used it as much as I should have, and the times in which I used it, it was it did amazingly. As you can see, if you look at the kills and deaths, it got 10 kills and only 4 deaths, showing just how little times it died. And with respect to its kills, it was very high with respect of the percentage of times it actually died with respect to how well it did. And that's just because I didn't want to overuse it, and I didn't overuse it. But when I did feel like it was a good bring, it was a very good bring, and it was by far the best mon on my team that week. There's a couple of times I really wanted to try slow Arctivish because Arctivish does have 55 base speed. So I tested bulky slow Arctivish with non slush rush abilities like water absorb or ice heal. So like slower ones, and then if you're a slow one, you get trick room up, you get vicious Ren, and you can outspeed by being really slow, and then have trick room up. And so I definitely considered it, and that's something I really wanted to try. But most of the times in which I tested those out, they just ended up not working out, or it just ended up not being bulky enough to be able to survive the attacks I wanted. That's definitely a set that I wanted to try. I didn't quite get to try. So pretty much every time I brought it, it was just slush rush. However, I do think that's very powerful. And on top of that, Arctivish, on top of doing really good damage with that, it actually is just really good defensive mon. It's water ice is very good for my team, not being weak to fire, not being weak to steel. In addition to that, Fish's Ren is just probably one of the best moves in the history of Pokemon. You know, especially when you have snap with it. So you know, not much else to say about it, but I definitely think it was pretty impressive. Next up, we have Ninetales. So Ninetales was my first overall pick, so I was definitely have high hopes for it. I think early on in the season, it was slacking a little bit, but I think it came back, picked it up in the end. Ninetales was just great. So Ninetales had 109 base speed, which is really good base speed. You get set up the hell, get 100% accurate blizzards. You get Moonblast. You get Icy Winds for speed control. You get Aurora Bell to set up for some protection. I did all those stuff. Um, I think the big thing is that I I also had, I think, an encore Ninetales into the Centaur Pirates that pretty much single handedly won me a match because I encored a protect, and it completely just made a really close match into a complete blowout. Um, Ninetales, just getting hell is very good for my team. For the chip, 100% accurate blizzards, and like Ice Body healing some of my certain mons, namely Mr. Rhyme. In addition to that, just Ninetales as itself was very impressive. Just damage output, even though not having the highest base stat because you get blizzards. Um, you know, I think Ninetales basically met exactly my expectations. It didn't really do anything else more per se. I think it just is a mon that is incredibly important to the mono ice type, because its ability to defensively take the fighting moves and being able to do good coverage. Obviously, one of the downside is it doesn't really hit the fighting, or it doesn't really hit the steel mons. However, I had one of the best mons to do that in Darmanitan. So Darmanitan is my second most impressive mon, and Darmanitan was a massively important mon this season. As I mentioned, it is one of my best ways, if not my explicit best way, to hit still mons because Flare Blitz with Guerrilla Tactics kills almost every still mon that exists. It does massive damage, and basically my joke throughout the season is that Darmanitan one shots everything if you if you try hard enough. um, yeah, I know Darmanitan. Typically I think every week except for one, I ran scarf item. So, or not scarf, choice items. So it was either choice band or choice scarf. Choice band Darmanitan does ungodly damage. It one shots mons that have no reason to be one shot. I was doing damage calcs, and at -1 I was one shotting Scrafty, and Scrafty is absurdly bulky mon. It is incredibly bulky, and Darmanitan being at -1 attack, lowers its attack notably, and I was still getting one shots on that Scrafty. Um, so definitely impressive. So one thing that I am happy with that I wanted to do the entire season, I did bring Darmanitan with not Guerrilla Tactics but with Zen mode 1 week. However, sadly for me, it never got to be in Zen mode because I actually won the game that it was low enough to have been to proc Zen mode, and Zen mode doesn't activate until the end of the turn. But that was something I really wanted to do. I tried Zen mode Darmanitan a bunch of times. I brought it once. The protect on my Darmanitan into a double up ended up being dramatically helpful and ended up helping me win the match. So definitely was huge. But Darmanitan, I think, was definitely my biggest answer to a lot of threats. And typically when there's a mon that I considered a must answer or was really concerning for me, typically it was just Darmanitan answers it. I throw out Darmanitan, kills something. So Darmanitan I think early on was on pace to be the kill leader, and then I ended up not using it as much in the later half. But I think Darmanitan is definitely great. Um, Going into the draft, one of the things I was really considering was whether or not I wanted the Darmanitan or the Mamoswine. And I strongly was, debating this because because I think ground ice coverage is really important because ground helps hit steel mons, it helps hit the rock mons, and the thick bat, as I mentioned, the Pallaswine, it could be a really big deal. However, I decided to just go with the Darmanitan because I thought the Flare Blitz was going to be more impactful, and I was completely right. I felt like Darmanitan was a massively important key piece to my team, and definitely, just gave me this offensive pressure that my opponents had to respect and fear, and you know, basically everyone had to say, how do I outspeed a Darmanitan, or how do I take an attack from Darmanitan? And typically, you can't take an attack from a Darmanitan. But with that, we have my final one, which is a surprise to no one, which is Mr. Rhyme. Mr. Rhyme was the entire core of my team. I brought Mr. Rhyme every single week, and Mr. Rhyme was significantly better than I was expecting, and I was expecting it to be great for me. Um, so Mr. Rhyme was great for a multitude of reasons. One, it was my only trick room or trick room setter, and so being able to set up trick room was a very important key to a lot of my weeks. In addition to that, it is my best special attacker, which means that if I want to do huge special damage, Mr. Rhyme is my best option at that. In addition to that, it is one of my better special defensive walls. So if I'm scared of special attackers, I can run Mr. Rhyme like with an AV, which I've done. In addition to that, it is my one of my two fake out mons, and it's my fake out mon that can take multiple hits, unlike Weavile, which almost always needs to run Focus Sash. And so that's another strength of it. In addition to that, it is one of my few mons that are not weak to fighting. Takes neutral damage to fighting, and so on and so on and so on. Rhyme was just a mon that basically, even if my opponent knew it was coming, it was never a bad bring. And I think that's the strength of was Rhyme on my team, or maybe Rhyme in general, is that I everyone who played me going, starting probably from week 4 knew that Mr. Rhyme was coming, and there was nothing they can do to punish me because everyone was already bringing steel coverage, or everyone was already bringing fire coverage into my team, and so nothing you could do could prevent Rhyme from just being a good mon because it's just generically such a good mon. It is bulky. It has good special attack. It has a great move pool. It has, supportive and offensive moves. And in addition, with my item choice, and my EV spread, the Mon can go from my scariest special attacker with that you have to fear on the off, fear that it's going to kill you with one hit, to my completely support oriented Mon with helping hand, light screen, reflect, trick room, and it's each week it could be any of those, and it is so hard to prepare for, especially because I'm already prepared for the super effective moves that I'm expecting to see. Yeah, no, and so with that, I'm gonna kind of go my little overview of my final thoughts, and we'll start with kind of continuing on. Mr. Rhyme is king. Uh, Mr. Rhyme was amazing. I am super happy with it. I know at some point during the draft, I'm like, I don't know if I need to prioritize Mr. Rhyme so highly because Mr. Mime Galar is a reasonable replacement. But I definitely do not think Mr. Rhyme Galar was a reasonable replacement. Mr. Rhyme was 100% the best mon on my team, and without it, I don't know how well I would have done at all because it just carried me entirely by being the linchpin in every single strategy and every single week. Because it's just the ability. It's my mon that can switch in. It's my mon that can do damage. It's my mon that can set up trick room. My mon that's fake out. It was great. Next, fake out on good mons. So what I mean by this is I think one thing that I that I learned this season is that yes, fake out is a great move. I don't think that anyone disagrees with that. But I think the ability to have fake out on mons that are generically very powerful is really important. I think what I mean by that is, getting very good value fake out mons or very high tier fake out mons is very impactful because Rhyme is a mon on and Weavile for to a lesser extent, but still are mons that are just generically powerful. And me having mons that can bring fake out but don't necessarily have to every week it gives my opponent fear. It makes them have to play in a certain way no matter what. And also just having the ability to have a fake out mon when if I want it any given week without making my team weaker as a whole was massive. And so I definitely think that having that is big. I think having two fake out mons I really love. I if I can, I always try to get more than one fake out mon. But Weavile and Mr. Rhyme being as good as they are just generically as being, I think is a really big deal to the success of my team. Next, I think that offensive monotypes work the best. So I've done a lot of monotype teams, and a lot of people kind of think before this season joke to me like, "Oh, you should do ice because haha, ice is like the worst type." I already did bug, so bug bug. Everyone believes bug is the worst type, but most people consider ice the second worst type, and um but when people said that, I always was like, I don't know. I feel like mono ice is like a lot better than a lot of types that you feel like would be worse. And I think a big aspect to it is that monotype teams, when you do them in draft, if you want to be successful, I think you have to lean offensive. The reason why you have to lean offensive for the most part is you don't have as many defensive switch-ins. You can't be as good at bulky offensive or bulky support mons because every single mon on your opponent's team is going to have super effective damage into every single mon on your team. And so, for example, if I was doing mono grass and I had Ferrothorn, I I have to expect Ferrothorn is going to get hit with a fire move every single game. And so that's the idea. And so the way in which you most effectively get around your defensive weakness is to offensively punish them. And that's why mons like Darmanitan were so big, because even though defensively it didn't do much, Flare Blitz killing things, Icicle Crash killing things, Superpower killing things, was able to deal with the mons that were very scary for me, and then the rest of them I could deal with by just being bulky or things like that. And so ice being such a good offensive typing, and so with the typing being so offensively effective, I think it ended up doing massive work. And I think that's one of the reasons why this was one of my most successful monotype teams in the VDL. And my final thought is that my team exceeded my expectations. So for anyone who didn't know, in the VDL, my first season I went 3-5. The following season I went 4-4. The following season I went 3-5. The following season I went 4-4. And so this season, based on my pattern, was I was expecting to be about a 3-5 season, maybe 4-4 if I was a little bit lucky. And I definitely was not expecting my season to get all the way up to 5-3 plus 6, the best 5-3 team, and making second seed in my division. And so I'm really excited and happy for how well my season went. Despite the fact that it seemed like it was gonna be not great based on my trends, and especially me starting off 0-2. But with that, I just want to finish off with some thank yous. So starting off with number one, Matrix. So Matrix was a massive help on this entire season. They did practice matches with me the entire season. They discussed with me in prep, and they definitely helped motivate me to do work and try to be my best. And I definitely think they were by far the most impactful person at helping me do well this season, on top of just the team being overall very powerful. Next up we have Miss Mag. Even the Miss Mag, currently in the semifinals, so they're having a really great season themselves. They've definitely helped discuss a lot with me, helped do a lot of prep matches, and definitely been a big member. But also Masenko, I'm not sure 2 and 3. Y'all are really close to each other, so probably should just do both of you. And honestly, both of y'all helped me at the same time quite a bit too. Both of y'all were super helpful. Y'all helped come up with some straight crazy ideas. I know Masenko helped me come up with the Iron Defense body press set that ended up helping me beat Miss Mag. I know the combination of them kind of came up with my week one fling, King's Rock. I know, they definitely helped me come up with some crazy strategies. Some of them I didn't quite use. I know one week they wanted me to do a double team snow cloak Frostlash that I ended up not bringing. But they definitely helped me come up with some interesting ideas, and both kind of helped me with some big prep. And I know Masenko specifically helped me a lot against Miss Mag. And that's probably one of the big reasons I was able to beat Miss Mag. And finally, I'd like to thank Lucian. So Lucian didn't help me nearly as much as the other ones, but they definitely had some very helpful, hints and ideas and certain things. I know, for example, they were one of the big people that convinced me to bring Ninetales in my first round of playoffs, in which I was able to get Ninetales Arctivish, in which previously I wasn't planning on doing that at all, and that definitely ended up being a major factor of me winning my first round of playoffs. But overall, I'd like to thank all four of y'all. Y'all all helped me notably, some more than others, namely Matrix. But all of you in particular were helpful, and I appreciate it. And I couldn't have done it without y'all. And with that, that's all I have. Thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed, and hopefully, hopefully y'all don't have to wait too long for the next VDL. But as of now, probably January. I'll see you next time.